Lakeland PBS presents Common Ground, brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Production funding of Common Ground is made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Welcome to Common Ground. I'm producer-director Scott Knudsen. In this episode, artist David Dobbs of the Grand Rapids area creates a painting from glitched online media.
My name is David Brian Dobbs. I'm a painter and artist. I am standing in front of Old Central School in Grand Rapids, Minnesota right now. That's where my studio is at, up on the top floor. Currently I'm an artist in residence, and I have that space because the city of Grand Rapids provides it to artists. And I applied and I was accepted, and I've been up there for a while now. This is an image from a TV show, The Prisoner. This is one of the episodes. It was called The General. It just has the main character sitting down, having a cup of coffee or tea. I like the media from a different era because they used color in a different way than we do today. Most movies today and television is more washed out. It's grayer or has more blue tones. Whereas the older television shows used brighter colors. They were still transitioning from theater, I think. You know, like especially in the early 50s into the 60s, they were still attracted to bright colors and wanted things to pop more. And I think also because just the technology then, you know, things were a lot easier to read if there were brighter colors, whereas now we have HD. So I chose this space in the studio just because it has less light, so I can do these during the daytime. The painting that I worked on is a screenshot from an episode of an old TV show called The Prisoner. It was an episode titled The General. That's what I titled the painting, The General. Each painting that I do is a screenshot from a moment in time when I'm watching a video online and it pauses for no reason. And so I take a screenshot of that, catalog it, and when it comes time to make a new painting, I look through them, find a good one that I like, and then that's what I'll paint. The drawing process takes quite a while. It takes a few hours at least. Usually I start here in the top corner and just start finding shapes in there and then seeing where I think they're changing color, even a very subtle change. I'm not as concerned about making it a perfect drawing because I know I'll paint it perfectly. The first time I started doing this, it was about moments in time that were universal and personal at the same time. So when I'm watching media, and I watch it all on my computer, I don't own a television. When I'm watching something on my computer and I'm streaming it online, it will pause for no reason. Like let's say my computer has a glitch or the streaming is interrupted or my internet service is spotty. If it'll pause for that second, that's what I take. I take a screen capture of that with my computer, and then those are the moments I paint. Some of the time I can kind of force it to happen. I'll use Wi-Fi that's across the street or something, just so I can get spotty reception. And I can't choose like the exact moment when it's gonna happen, but I can know that it's gonna happen. So like, I wanted to do a painting from the old Batman TV show, so I just kept watching it and waiting for those moments to happen. And you know, I got probably like a half a dozen moments that happened, and that was one of the best ones, so I ended up taking that painting, and I did a similar thing with this. So this one, I was watching The Prisoner online on my computer and it just stopped. So then I took a screen capture of that, and that's why I'm painting this specific image. There were a few other ones from this television show that I had. Usually I end up with like a few hundred images on my computer, and I don't paint every single one of them. But you know, you'll find ones here and there that'll be just really interesting images, like this one where I thought it was really nice and it was kind of beautiful. And I thought there was something really beautiful in those moments because they only appear for me, but at the same time, it's media that thousands or millions of other people have seen. So they've all seen this image in this media, but they didn't see it the way that I see it. So it connects us universally, but it also has like a personal touch to it because this is only for me, but now like I'm making it for everyone else too. I have always been fascinated by these ideas of reinterpretation and things that are lost in translation sometimes. But even when things are lost, there can be beauty in that. So I knew I wanted to do something from this TV show. So I just started watching it on like a public Wi-Fi service. And because it was quite a distance away, I knew eventually it was going to stop and buffer. So I just waited for those moments to happen and found a good one that I really liked, and that's why I'm making it from this painting. But I had a good amount of images from this, maybe 4 I think I got from this one episode that I was watching. So I can sort of control it, I can sort of force it to happen, but I can't find that exact spot when it's actually going to happen. I've got, you know, out of the 4 images I got from this was the only one that I thought was usable. It's interesting to try to force chaos almost, and then also to then try and make order out of something that's random and chaotic. It's really hard to see the gradation between all of these spots, but I can kind of see that there's a little change in color, so I start with that, but it's never perfect. I've done the same image a couple times because, you know, sometimes the paintings will be so big that nobody will buy it. And then I'll have someone be like, well, I want that painting, but now make it smaller. So I'll redo it, but it's never gonna be the same. Maybe the light is different, or maybe I'm just not seeing the same thing. You know, it'll look similar, but it's not gonna be exact. So every time, even if I do the same image, it's going to be different. But I've always worked like incredibly slow. Some of these paintings will take 2 to 3 months, and it's just hard to make enough to sell or to show when it's that slow. But yeah, it takes however long it takes. And the first few paintings I did were in black and white. And it happened, and I was like, oh, there's just completely random.
Is that from Dracula?
Yeah. Yeah, you're the only person who's ever recognized that. Yeah, that's from Dracula. It's Van Helsing and Jonathan Harker. I've had lots of people look at it, and nobody's ever recognized that that's what it's from. That I didn't know these things were going to happen. I wasn't even sure what I was doing then. I think I was watching Casablanca, so that was the first one I did. It was watching the end scene of Casablanca, and Ingrid Bergman's mouth was like wide open and Humphrey Bogart's eyes were closed. And I was like, oh, there's something really beautiful about that. It's awkward, but beautiful at the same time. So I just took a screen capture of that, and I think I lived with it for probably about 6 months because I was doing different paintings at the time. And then I was like, well, I should do something with that. And I was like, well, I'm gonna try and paint it. And then when I sat down to try and paint it, I was like, well, how am I gonna paint this? Like it was nice because it was really distorted because I was watching like clips on YouTube. So that's kind of where I kind of got this like pixelated style from, was that very first painting was kind of pixelated, but the shapes weren't as refined as this. It took a few years for it to become like really refined and look very pixelated. Sometimes I go over the bigger shapes first, and because I know like this is blue and it's going to be a different color than the brown next to it. So it can make it kind of easier to do a bigger shape first and then go in and work in the smaller shapes. This process usually takes anywhere between like 4 to 10 hours, depending on how big the painting is. So this show was about a spy who went in and resigned. And he went home after his resignation, and right after he got home, someone came in and gassed his whole apartment, and he went unconscious. And when he woke up, he was in this place called the Village. He could never leave the Village, and they were always asking him why he resigned. So they always wanted to know what side he was on, what was his motivation for resigning, because it was during the Cold War, so maybe he went over to the other side. Maybe he was selling his secrets, or maybe there's some other motivation. So they wouldn't let him leave this village until he said why he resigned. And he was a pretty stubborn man, so he never gave in and he kept on trying to escape. Most of the 13 episodes of the show is more like a procedural where it's just every episode he's trying to escape, and it's just a new way of him trying to escape. Or there would be different things where they were trying to mess with his mind to get him to confess why he resigned. Like I said, with the show, it seems like it's a procedural through the first 11 episodes, and then the final 2 episodes are like a 2-parter, and you start to realize that it was all building towards this finale, and it actually seems like everything makes sense then. So I'm painting in the image now, and it usually takes anywhere from about a month to 4 months. Depends how often I can get in the studio. But it's usually somewhere around 200 to 300 hours of work. A lot of it can go kind of slow because I'm trying to paint it in and trying to get the squares to come out. Whereas when I drew it out, like it doesn't always come out perfectly when I draw it, but now when I'm painting it, I'm trying to make it exactly perfect and square-like. And so I tend to use like a really small brush, and so that makes it go really slow, but I want to have like as sharp and crisp of lines as I can possibly get. Even though like you can't always see those lines, I can see them, so I know they're there, so I want it to be right. The painting, usually I start off with the darkest color. I usually start off with a black because the black is about the easiest, because usually I can just mix up a black and then just add some white to it and just keep going with that subtle gradation of black. And usually it helps me visualize what I'm actually painting. Because sometimes after I draw it, I'll look at it and I'm like, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what I was trying to draw here. Because a lot of the times I won't start painting the day I drew it. So I don't always remember exactly where to start. So it helps a lot to start with the blacks. So it'll bring out the shadows and things, and you start to see the definition. I mix all my colors from just the primaries. So I just get the primary colors and then I'll mix up a black, and that helps me make different blacks. So I can make a bluish black, a yellowish black, a reddish black, a brownish black, depending on like what I'm painting. I want it to look as close as I can possibly get it to the image, but I also know that it's impossible and that I can't match it exactly. So after a while, you start to just think about what the painting wants, not what I'm trying to recreate as a video. I'm not trying to recreate a video, I'm making a painting. So I think about it more as like, what does the painting want? Instead of trying to directly translate something, I think about it more as like using it as inspiration. Yes, I'm very technically and very exactly trying to recreate it, but I also know, like I said, in my mind that that is completely impossible. So I start to think about, how does it work as a painting? Do the colors work together? And there's many times where I'll finish the painting and then I'll look at it, I'll live with it for a day or two, and then I'll go and change some of the colors because they just don't work. Of course, I would love to be able to make it exactly like the still. That would be amazing. But like I said, I'm pretty sure that's impossible because the mediums are just completely different. Paint has different hues and saturations of color than video will, because the video is like colors laying on top of each other. Whereas maybe if I did it in a different medium than oil paint, maybe I could achieve that, but the oil paint just doesn't work that way. I like oils a lot more than acrylics for two reasons, because the oils have different color than acrylics. Usually the oils have more of an earthier color or a more natural color, I think. And also because a lot of the time I will mix up a large amount of color and I like it to still be there the next day when I come back. I like to still be able to use it, whereas the acrylics will dry out. Where I'm at right now is a pretty tricky spot because like this is like this grayish green here, and then here it's more of a purplish gray, like in this area. So I've got to make sure that I don't mix these two colors up when they're so close together. And this area is supposed to be farther away, so trying to get those spatial relationships to work so that it actually looks correct after I paint it is always tricky. So sometimes I end up staring at my computer for like a good 5 minutes before I make a decision. You know, because everything right now I'm doing is just a shape next to white in basically like a void. So it's hard to judge whether the color's right or not until you put the color down next to it. And a lot of the time I have to sit and figure out like, okay, I think this is the top of this guy's head. Like I think it's right there. So I hope I'm right on that. So that would mean like that this should be that color there. But the way that the colors respond to each other is important. And even though I'm trying to translate what is on my computer screen for the image, it's not as important as you would think it would be. There's a point where you have to disregard the image in many ways and work with what's happening on the canvas, how the colors relate to each other on there. So when you look at one of the paintings, the first thing I want people to see is just the craft that goes into it, the amount of time and the labor that goes into it. I spend a lot of time on each painting. Usually they take a month or two to complete. The stress just mounts for me once I get to the end. Yesterday I worked in here for like 11 hours. When I get close to the end, I just have to just keep working just to get it done. I sit awake at night, like thinking about it. The next painting I want to do is going to be smaller. So I'm trying to figure out which one is going to be good for like a smaller piece. And the smaller ones, I like to do things that are a little more, not exactly like commercial, but things that people would want to put in their house. Because the smaller ones are going to sell easier than the bigger ones. So like the bigger ones, I'll usually try to do things that are a little more experimental or stuff that I'm really interested in. But with the small ones, I like to do stuff that, you know, will probably sell because I don't have to charge as much for the smaller ones and they don't take as long. So I'm trying to figure out like what I want to do for that right now. And sometimes too, I'll set up the canvas and then I'll project onto it and I'll be like, well, that one doesn't really work for this canvas because it's too small, or, you know, it's too big, it's gonna be too distorted. The resolution on the images that I get to really matters a lot, because if I have like a high definition image from like, you know, like Game of Thrones or Westworld, I can make a really big painting out of it and still have it be really detailed. But if it's something like that movie The Pirate, where I just watched it on YouTube and I took a still from that and then I look at it and it's like, well, I can't do that like this size. It's way too distorted and the shapes are gonna be really big and I just can't get any good detail out of it. So some of that really depends on the moment when I look at it and see if it's gonna work or not. When I get to the end, I usually have like spots like, you know, like this where it's kind of all over and stuff like that. But then at the end, I'll work from left to right. Normally I don't do that when I'm working. Usually I just pick where I want to start and just start painting it. Or like I'll start usually with the blackest part. But when I get to the end, then I'm like, okay, work on the open spots here and work from left to right. So I try to avoid putting my finger in paint as much as I can. But normally I don't work like that. Some people think I just start over here and then just like go through the whole thing like a computer prints it out. And I just don't work like that because it's not interesting to me. I want to jump into like the cooler parts right away, or sometimes I do the whole background first and then do the foreground afterwards, but depends on the painting. Really, the biggest reason why I don't like the end is because I can never predict when it's going to happen. Like I said today when you came in, I was like, well, you know, maybe it'll be 2 or 3 hours of work and I'll be done. And now that I'm painting it, I'm like, oh geez, this is actually like 6 or 7, maybe 8 hours of work left. Like there's no way I'm getting this done in 2 or 3 hours. So it just keeps dragging on like that. It's one of those things where you feel like, is it ever gonna end? But, you know, of course it will. But you just gotta put the work in and get it done. But if you look at my body of work too, like you'll see the first few paintings of this style that I did, like weren't even these geometric shapes. They were more organic shapes. And as I kept making these paintings, I was like, well, I'll start to even force more my idea upon it so that what I'm trying to say is a lot clearer to people visually. And then so I started working like more geometric and very sharp corners on things. And then I was still using a pretty big brush, like maybe like a 1/4 inch brush. And I painted those for a while. Then I started painting real small and I'm like, well, I need a smaller brush. But after painting small, then I go back to the bigger paintings, like this is a bigger one kind of, and I'm still using the small brush though. I really like the way that I can get detail with this smaller brush. So it's all in evolution. You don't just make it perfect the first time. And that's what I think a lot of young artists have a struggle with. They want it to be perfect the first time. But I do get excited at the end too though, like I'm excited to see this thing done. This is gonna be one of my favorite paintings, I can already tell, just because it's really interesting, it's really colorful. I love the composition of this painting. I choose that when I decide to paint it, I look at the composition, and if I really like the composition and stuff, that's part of the reason why I'll choose a certain painting. But you get into it and then you're like, what am I looking at? I don't remember even why I decided to do this one. And then I get to the end and I'm like, oh yeah, this is what was exciting about it. This is what's really gonna be cool about this painting when I finish it. All of my paintings have this quality that connects us is through pop culture. I think it's a universal thing and it connects each of us because we all recognize these different things from popular culture. But each moment that I paint is something that appeared just for me. So it's something that connects both the personal to the universal. So this moment that appeared only for me in this thing that we all know.
Thank you so much for watching. Join us again next time on Common Ground. If you have an idea for Common Ground in North Central Minnesota, email us at legacy@lptv.org or call 218-333-3014. To watch Common Ground online, visit lptv.org and click Local Shows. To order episodes or segments of Common Ground, call 218-333-3020. Production funding of Common Ground was made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money by the vote of the people November 4th, 2008. If you watch Common Ground online, consider becoming a member or making a donation at lptv.org.